Okay. This is a message for every librarian in America, all three of you. You are not entitled to anything. You're not entitled to my time. You're not entitled to my money. You're not entitled to the attention of the American consumer. And you're not as smart as you think you are. You are not better than me. You're not better than any of us. Just because you chose to sit in an empty building all day, surrounded by books, because inanimate objects are the only way that you can feel superior to everyone else. The only way that you can manage to maintain your narcissistic illusion of superiority is if you go in an empty building and surround yourself with inanimate objects. And you know what else? You are so happy that nobody goes to the library anymore. Because that way, you don't have to be confronted with anything about yourself. You don't have to be confronted about your shitty personality. You don't have to be confronted about the fact that you are socially awkward. You don't have to be confronted about the fact that, I'm sorry, I said that I wasn't going to scream or yell or scream in this video, and also that I wasn't going to make any derogatory comments about homeless people. So I'm really, really, really trying here. I'm going to really try. My point is this. You need to humble yourselves, because I'll be honest, your attitude is off-putting. You know, you're bemoaning the fact that nobody goes to the library anymore without thinking about why that might be. Why would I want to go in a building that smells like shit, that's stuffy, where I can be judged by someone who thinks that they are smarter than me? Why would I want to do that? Why would I, when I could go to any other building, when I have all the knowledge in the world in my pocket, why would I go into your building and be judged by an asshole? Sorry. I'm sorry. But I really tried. I really did. Yesterday, that's the thing. I wanted to have a good experience. I wanted to go to the library. And I wanted to get everything out of it that you are always telling me that I will get out of it if I go there. But I didn't. All I got was a maladaptive loser. I was thinking yesterday morning, I need some information. Because if you haven't been following along, in my last video, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Pierre Lafort. And yes, that is how you pronounce his name. I don't know how French people do it. They must have an extra flap in there or something, because all their words are like, oh, you. That's what all French words sound like to me. And they just do it constantly, you know, and then they're just like, oh yeah, I'll have some of the, and I'm like, what are you saying? And then they spell it out, and it's like BARDEAOXO75612 semicolon. And then they're like, how could you not know how to pronounce that? I had a conversation with my friend Pierre Lafort, and he was telling me about my struggles with Big Red. But he was being very mysterious. You know, he said, you need to stay out of this. You need to drop this, because Big Red is a very scary, dangerous man. And I said, well, why? And he just said, oh, I can't tell you that, you know? So the whole rest of the night and the whole next morning, I was thinking, I need some information. I need to find some information about this Big Red character. And because, you know, nobody is going to spoon feed it to me. So at first I did think, maybe I'll try online, because that's where everybody gets all their information, right? So I went on the internet and I tried to search information. Where can I find information on the internet? But the thing about the internet is it's very, very confusing. There's no sort of steward who can sort of guide you through the bowels of the internet, to show you where you can find the information that you're looking for, like a librarian can in a library, right? So that's when I sort of got the idea, bing, I thought about the library for the first time in probably 20 years. And I said, I wonder if those are still around. Because that would be perfect. I watch movies and TV shows all the time where the character needs information. And so they go to the library, and then there's a montage of them, flipping through books and getting all the information that they need. And then when they're done, then they proceed with the rest of the story, now having the information. So I was thinking, that is exactly what I need. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to the library. Now, outside of the library, there was a group of people. Maybe they were esteemed neuroscientists. Maybe they were, physical therapists. Maybe they were successful Wall Street stockbrokers. All I know is that they were leaning against the building, sitting on the ground. So I tried to ignore them as best I can. But here's the thing, okay? You have to understand something. Making a first impression is very, very important. The outside of your building is crucial because it shows people why they should go inside of it, right? I have had a lot of experiences where, I will meet someone or a person who I want to get to know better, maybe a friend or more than a friend. And they'll say, oh yeah, come over to my house. And, you don't know everything about the person's background. You don't know what they make per year. You don't know what situation they're in life. You assume based on the way that they conduct themselves, but some people are better than others at concealing that. So then you go to their house, and it's some shithole in the middle of the projects, And I have had many experiences where, with someone who I thought maybe was going to be a friend of mine, I get to their house, and I just get this horrible feeling, and you have to trust your gut in situations like that. And I'd look around and I say, I am not safe here in this neighborhood. I am not safe with this person. And I don't know what the inside of their house looks like. They could have people chained to the wall, covered in shit. They could be waiting for me to go into the house, and then they're going to put me in an Iron Maiden. I don't know. That's why the front of your building is so important, because it signals to people what they can expect when they go inside. And so right off the bat, the outside of the library was not inspiring much confidence in me. And in a normal situation, if it were a restaurant or if it were a friend's house or something of that nature, I would have just left and I would not have gone inside the building. But the reason why I decided to proceed is because I know what a library is. There's sort of a general understanding of a library in our culture, right? in our civilization, it's one of the oldest institutions that exists in civilization. You know, next to the shitter or city hall, you know, it's like back in the day of the dinosaurs, every human settlement had, you know, an outhouse, a regular house, a library, you know, and then, you know, that's it. So I knew what to expect when I walked in. I wasn't afraid, because I said, when I go in here, I am going to see shelves with books on them. And that was sort of a necessary anchor for me to feel comfortable proceeding. So outside of the library was a security guard. For what purpose, I cannot understand, because he didn't seem to be concerned with enforcing any security about the possible neuroscientists or the possible Nobel Prize peace-winning authors who were congregating outside of the building and scaring me and scaring off anybody who they so desperately want to come into the library. But I said, okay, you know what, again, maybe those people are reading books and I just can't see. You know, maybe they're all reading the encyclopedia, and right now they're just taking a break, you know, to smoke something, you know. I don't know. So I walked up to the security guard and I said, hello, sir. And he said, what's going on? And I said, well, I would like to go to the library. And he said, that's great. It's right in there. And already I was kind of like, well, okay, then if you don't want me to go in, fine. Because and what this person doesn't seem to understand, and what everybody at the entire institution that I encountered that day doesn't seem to understand, is that I have every reason to not go to the library. I have 100 million reasons not to go to the library. There's nothing in there that I can get that I couldn't get on my phone without getting up from my sofa, without putting away my Bugles chips, you know, without leaving my house, without going into the traffic and sitting an hour in traffic, without having to put a jacket on because it's freezing outside, without having to kill 3 hours of my precious time that I could spend doing something else, without risking my safety and my life by walking around with all these possible, you know, neuroscientists prowling around. So why then are you acting entitled to my business? Why are you acting like it should be a given? You should be standing outside of the library and saying, please come into the library. You know, you'll have a great time in here. You can get information. You can hang out. You can do whatever you want. Just please come in. Come in and we will show you a good time. No, just shrug. Yeah, it's over there. You know, go in or don't. I don't give a shit. How is that supposed to inspire confidence in me about my experience that I'm going to have in this establishment? So I sort of gave the guy a second chance, and I was like, I walked over to the door and I said, so this is the library right here? And he said, yep. And I said, should I go in? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, the library. Do you think I should go in here? And he said, well, do you want to go in? And I said, I mean, I'm not sure. Do you think I should? And he said, look, man, I'll never forget this. He looked at me and he said, look, man, I don't have time for this. You explain to me any other establishment that exists in our society where the person outside of the door can say to you, I don't have time for you. That's the disadvantage of going to a place that is subsidized by my tax dollars. Because they don't have to rely on my money. They don't have to rely on anybody. The only thing that they have to rely on are the fact that the bureaucratic government is going to pay their bills for them. So they're not incentivized to act nice. They're not incentivized to go to any effort to provide people with a good experience. So I said, well, I'm sorry, sir, if you don't have time for me, why don't I just go home then? I'm more than happy to go home then, if you don't have time for me. And he just stopped paying attention to me. So I said, you know what? Maybe that guy is just, maybe he doesn't work for the library. Maybe he, is a protester against the library. I don't know who this guy is. Maybe he has some sort of anti-library agenda. I don't know. So I said, okay, that's strike number 2, right? But one more chance. I'll give these people one more chance. So I got the security guard's name and the business that he worked for. And believe me, I am going to be utilizing that information. Because you can't treat someone like that. I don't care who you think you are. You know something? Why does nobody have compassion for me? That's what I want to know. Why is it that when I'm talking about people who are drug addicts and people who are killers and murderers, does everybody say, no, you don't understand. Those people have been through a lot. You have to have compassion for those people. But nobody has compassion for me. Every single thing that I say, people interpret in the least generous possible light. Why is it that nobody says, you know what, we should really give this guy another chance. We should excuse his behavior because he's society. The odds are stacked against him in society. And here's where I will compromise and meet in the middle. I will be more compassionate for people, but they need to be more compassionate for me too. It's like I said yesterday, why don't we all be nicer? Or 2 days ago. Why don't we all have more compassion for one another? Capiche? But it won't happen because people aren't ready for that. They don't want to have compassion for people. So I go in, and at the front desk is an old woman who I can tell instantly has spent her entire life festering with rage at how stupid she thinks everyone else is besides her. I can tell that has calcified her being, her trembling rage at her fellow human being for not being as smart as she is, or not being as well-read, or not being as cultured. I can just feel that emanating off of her. And so she might as well have just said to me, hey, you stupid hick moron, what are you doing in here? Shouldn't you be over at McDonald's? And if this were a McDonald's, I would have left right then. But it's not. And I was trying to be charitable. And I was trying to say, you know what? They're probably not used to people coming in here. They're probably not used to somebody like me, who has every reason not to go to the library, deciding that they want to give it a shot. So she probably doesn't even know that I'm here. So I say, hello there. And she just goes, oh, hi. Hi. And I say, is this the library? And she goes, yep. And I say, okay. Are you a librarian? And she goes, yeah. And she's been giving me one-word answers this whole time. So immediately I say, how is your day going today? Thinking that, maybe she just got a call from her husband that they're divorcing, or maybe she ate something bad for lunch and it's been causing her some distress internally. I don't know. You never know what people are going through in their lives. And I try to see that in people. I try to say, well, this person could be having the worst day of their lives, and I could be walking in at the worst possible moment, and it's my first impression of the person, but it's their, most horrible moment of their entire life. So I say, how's your day going today? And she says, fine. So I say, okay. I am looking, and I said, remember, this whole time I still have a smile on my face, and I'm really trying to be the better person here. And I say, I was wondering if you could help me. I am looking for some information. And she says, information about what? Like that. And I say, well, I'm not really sure yet. It was nothing like it is in the movies. In the movie, I just don't... Sorry, it kind of... Honestly, it makes me a little emotional. Because I don't understand what I did to deserve being treated this way. Because I was trying to do a good thing. I was trying to be a good person. I was trying to help people out who need help, in this consumerist society. And I don't understand why, if there is a God, I don't understand why when I try to do good things, I am in return treated like garbage. So I honestly, I started getting a little upset, because I just don't really feel welcome here. I don't really feel like I'm valued. I don't really feel like I'm cared about. I don't feel safe, and so I say, well, do you have any information about, where can I find information about a person? And she says, who? And I say, well, I don't know their name. And she yelled at me. She snapped at me. And she said, sir, like that. She said, sir, you're going to have to be more specific. And I said, I don't know. That's the point. That's the reason why I came to the library, was to get information that I don't have. If I had the information, I wouldn't have had to come here. The whole reason why I'm coming to the library is so that I can get information that I lack. Everybody is not as smart as you. Not everybody is a loser who sits in a building alone and reads books all day. I don't have the information that you have. You are supposed to be compassionate, and you are supposed to help me find the information. I didn't say this. But I said, you know what? Clearly, I am not welcome here. Clearly, I'm bothering you. Clearly, I made a mistake by coming here. And I should just leave. That's what you want, right? For me to just leave and never come back. If you want me to leave, just say that. She said, sir, what can I help you with today? And I said, no, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to I don't want to get in the way of all your precious self-loathing and self-aggrandizement time. Don't let me interrupt your uninterrupted life of superiority complex. Why don't I just get out of your way? And honestly, why don't I go a step further and I'll just go ahead and jump off a bridge? She says, sir, what can I help you find today? And I said, all right. I am being targeted by a madman, lunatic psycho who has tried to kill me. He had his goonies kidnap me, put me in a sack, and they dropped me off in the middle of the desert to die. He is a dangerous madman. And she sort of was, whenever you're talking to someone and you can tell that their eyes start to glaze over because they consider you a crazy person. That's what was starting to happen with this woman. Even though honestly, it's something that really I have a lot of insecurity about. It's something that really discourages me from opening up to people because they're just going to think that I'm a freak. And they're just going to think that I'm a psycho crazy person. And she said, sir, well, why don't I direct you to some resources that might be able to help? And I said, that's why I'm here. This is the resource that is supposed to help me. I am looking for information about the madman who is trying to murder me. And you're not being helpful with that at all. And she said, why don't you, and she brings out a pamphlet for a psychiatrist health center of one of the loony bins. And I say, I don't need to be put in a ward. I need somebody to help me find information. Why is that so hard for you to understand? You're just like everybody else who writes me off. As soon as I start to open up about anything, you say you need to be on medication. You need to go to therapy. You need to go to a psych ward. You need to be strapped in a jacket, a straight jacket, and sedated and put on a stretcher. Help me find information about Big Red. Then the security guard comes in, Mr. Asshole from earlier. And he says, is there a problem, sir? And I say, yeah, we do have a problem, as a matter of fact, because you are partially responsible for this. You nearly made me cry earlier when you treated me like a piece of shit for daring to want to go in to your library. And now you're going to come out here. This is exactly the gaslighting thing that I was talking about yesterday that everybody loves to do. It's everybody on earth's favorite move. When they push you to the point where you start acting crazy, and then they say you're acting crazy. And I say, no, you made me crazy. You're responsible for my behavior. So I say, there's nothing that I need from you, because clearly there was nothing that you needed from me. All human beings are created equal. And both of you, because you're so insecure that you had to seek out positions of artificial superiority and authority, because you didn't have the confidence to give it to yourself, you don't consider me equal. You consider me a subhuman. When honestly, I am more human than you. And that is something that I have realized today. So fuck both of you. And I said, don't worry. I'm leaving. You don't have to call the police. You don't have to put me in a stretcher. You don't have to put me in a psych ward. I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. Don't worry about that. There was no reason why I should have even come here in the first place. So I hope all libraries are bulldozed and replaced with Chipotles. And I will never go to a library again.